Hello and welcome to Who We Ood, an unofficial Doctor Who watch along podcast. My name is Cameron. I'm going to be one of your hosts today's episode. I'm here with my co-host, as always, Ben. How is your day going today, Benjamin?
It's all right. Could be better, could be worse. Just a slow day off from work, playing the new Fortnite season, playing the new Dragon Age, watching One Piece. About it. How about you, Cam?
I'm a ball of nerves, Ben. Today is not a good day. We're recording this the day after the presidential election, so I'm just a big ball of nerves waiting for the next 4 years. It's
Yeah,
going to be an interesting 4 years.
it certainly will be, one way or the other.
We'll see how the world's like in 2028.
Still be here weekly, though.
But today's episode, we're not going to be talking about the 2024 presidential election of the United States of America. Today, we're going to be talking about Pyramids of Mars, which, of course, is one of the classics. This is very much highly regarded in terms of the Doctor Who sphere or fans,
Oh, yes.
many of them counting it as one of the best stories of the Hinchcliffe era, which is many people's favorite era. Came out October 25th, 1975, and last broadcasted on November 15th, 1975. Written by, did you look at all about the writing history of this story, Ben?
No, I didn't.
So it is a very interesting one. It's written by Stephen Harris. Stephen Harris does not exist as a human being.
Oh, is that a pseudonym for, like, a couple people, or
So Louis Griefer is how I'm going to pronounce it. He was the original writer on the story. He couldn't do the rewrite process, so Robert Holmes just rewrote the whole thing. So it's basically at the end of the day, Robert Holmes wrote the story. He took like the basic ideas of like mummies from the original script for Louis Griefer and then just turned it into what it is. It's like the original draft had the Brigadier in it and it was going to be in a British museum. Like it was going to be much different. So this is very much you can just say this is written by Robert Holmes.
hmm,
And then directed by Patty Russell, who did do a story that we have watched. She did Invasion of the Dinosaurs, which she did a really good job on. There's another director would have made that story very boring,
yes.
and she made it not the worst story in the world. So good job, Patty Russell.
It was definitely not the worst story.
Yeah, that's basically it for the production stuff. Ben, let's just get right into it. What did you think of Pyramids of Mars?
Very, very good. This is one of the ones where, like, I didn't write too many notes, just very good, no note. I can definitely see why it's one of the legendary episodes and why it would be important enough to be referenced in the future that I shouldn't know about yet. But unfortunately do.
Because of course, if you are not aware, audience member, Ben is watching Doctor Who in order, so he does not know anything about Sutek's return in the new series.
I know he does, and that's it. And I don't want you, Cam, or any of you in the comments to tell me anything further. But it is quite a good story. I'm assuming you agree.
I love this story. This is one of my favorite classic Doctor Who episodes. Saw this at a young age. I must have been like 11 or 12. That perfect time to watch a story like this. So just loving it. And I love it to this day. It's one I rewatch, if not every year, I watch it at least every other year. I will watch Pyramids of Mars. And there's not a lot else I can say about it except for I love it from a general standpoint, I should say.
Mhm.
It kind of just does everything that this era does really well and just hits it out of the park. It has a great villain. It has great pacing for the most part, and it has some of the best like side characters in this era of the show. So let's get right into it. First thing I have is we can go in a little. I'm gonna do this kind of similar to the Genesis episode that we're gonna do a little bit in order of it, but it's not gonna be as detailed as Genesis. So it starts off with the prologue and the tomb. It's kind of fun that it's just like very rare in classic Doctor Who we see outside of Britain on Earth. And it's just, of course, Scarman going into the cave and doing like the kind of that mummy trope of opening up the curse.
Yeah.
What did you think of that prologue scene, Ben?
Yeah, it's a decent, I guess technically not, but kind of cold open, establishing some mystery and setting the mood. Does a decent job.
Fun fact about the prologue is that those Egyptians that run away from the tomb are the only characters that are not the Doctor and Sarah that don't die in this serial. But in the novelization, Terrence Sticks kills them. So everyone dies in the novelization.
Damn.
I found that to be quite funny. And then after that prologue scene, we are introduced to. We saw the TARDIS last episode in A Planet of Evil, but this is the full, like, money shot version of the TARDIS. We get that, like, that camera pullback where Tom unveils himself under the hat, or it's like he's putting on the hat. It's something along those lines. I think he's messing with his hat, and like the camera's pulling back. Did you notice that, like, we haven't got a TARDIS set in, like, in a long time?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. It's been I guess I hadn't really noticed, but now that you're saying that, yeah, not really.
It's been like since basically the Three Doctors where they really showed off like a full version of the TARDIS set, you know? That it wasn't just like one of the TARDIS sets where like they had like a little tiny space in they needed it for the script, so they have like a little tiny bit of it on like the stage.
Yeah, just like 2 walls.
Like this is the full set. And then of course after like that introductionary shot, we get the great conversation between Sarah and the Fourth Doctor. And it is an example of why so many fans in particular love their dynamic and why they're highly regarded as having the best Doctor companion dynamic in the classic show. It is just like the chemistry is just dynamite in that scene. Did you think that they had chemistry for that scene, or did that scene like from a first time watch did that not stand out to you?
Yeah, I thought it noteworthy. I thought it was good. The only thing I wrote down was that he mentions Victoria, which it is uncommon that a past incarnation's companion is mentioned.
Oh yeah, that's something that like would be very popular in like a New Who to do. But in like classic Doctor Who, at this point, you wouldn't refer to an old companion like that.
Yeah, like I imagine many people saw this and have no idea who the hell Victoria is.
Oh no. Like this would have been like 6, 7 years ago. Like they would have no concept of who Victoria is if they're like a 10-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, she was what, like 68?
Yeah.
Long time ago.
In the world of no reruns.
Mhm.
And then like I think that what stands out to me is that like Tom is very grumpy from the outset of this story. And it just like they have that great line of just like he's like, I'm 750 years old. And then Sarah like quips back at him saying, so you're middle aged. And then he quips back at her like with a yes. Like I think so. I think it's like a yes. It's fantastic. And then like he's like, I have better things to do than run off again with the Brigadier. It's like fantastic. I love that moment. I rewatched that like that conversation bit so much. It is one of my favorite moments of the Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane, just Sarah Jane in general. And then we have like that little. It's kind of is broken off with just like the face of dog Sutek comes, or Jackal Sutek, I should say, comes in, and there's like an explosion.
Mhm.
It's kind of like it doesn't age that well, but like you could imagine in the time that maybe this would have been exciting to watch.
Sure, yeah.
But in modern perspective, you're kind of going, okay, so what? Like, it's kind of funny. That's just like this really bad jackal head, and just a like a little Spock. Nowadays, of course, and like if that was like in the new series, it'd have like a massive explosion, and like they would have like this great CGI shot of it, and like the camera would be shaking and moving, and like of course they don't have that in classic Doctor Who in 1975.
No, they don't.
Do you have anything to say about the jackal head, Ben?
No, nothing at all.
So then after that, they land in 1911. And then like we get the introduction of Scottman's like mansion. This cool fact is that that was at the time Mick Jagger's mansion that they shot at. Like the exterior stuff for that gives a great like mood to the story of like if it's in that gothic era of this particular story,
Uh-huh.
and really helps out with just like those shots of the Fourth Doctor and Sarah just roaming around the estate. What did you think of Mick Jagger's mansion, Ben?
Yeah, it's suitably gothic, and it's definitely the home of somebody rich who's up to no good.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. And then we are introduced to Ibrahim, who's kind of like the henchman for Pot One, who's kind of like the. How would you describe him as a character, Ben?
More than what you just said as just a hench.
Like he kind of is just like the henchman before we get the actual henchman of the serial.
Yeah, I suppose he's like a pre-antagonist before the real one reveals himself.
It's kind of hard to describe as like we're watching it in the modern standpoint. I don't know if you would consider this racist today. It's I don't know. I feel like I we have to mention that like it could come off as racist, but like
Like a Egyptian butler with a hat.
yeah, with the fez. It's like kind of fit into stereotypes. Would be even worse if the actor isn't really Egyptian, which in this time period could totally be the case. But like he works.
Yeah.
Great cannon fodder for the cliffhanger for pot one.
Yes.
So then the Sarah Jane and the doctor land inside of this mansion. I like the set that like the like with sarcophaguses. I think that's good iconography for the serial. And then of course we have him playing the organ and like spooky shit's happening, Ben.
Yes.
And then they meet up with the like butler character, and then like they run away, and then we start to get something that we get a lot of in the story, which is basically like running in the woods. Which I kind of enjoy about this serial is that like as a kid, you could imagine like you could pretend like play like fucking Pyramids of Mars because it is just like just some guys, just guys basically just with guns being like, I'm looking for you in the woods. And like, you have these mummies just like looking for Sarah Jane and the doctor in the woods. It's
Can pretend the mummies are after you.
like you could picture that kids were doing that back in the day.
Mhm.
I love that shot in particular of like Sarah's like just peeking above, seeing the mummies. I think that shot's fantastic, and Elizabeth Sladen gives a great performance in her eyes in that shot.
Oh, yes.
And then, like, it has another element to this story I enjoy is that they're all like a lot of guns. Like, you don't get that in like modern like kids TV or like all family TVs. That like they're all just roaming around the woods with guns, trying to shoot at each other.
Mhm.
But I guess actually, yeah, this would be a good time to mention it. We see the mummy. What do you think of the mummies this episode, Ben, and that costume design?
It is a little bit of a weird design, not what you would think of as like a mummy in like the traditional sense, more of big and lumbering. But I mean, it's revealed that it's a robot later, which makes more sense. But they're definitely creepy looking with like the giant, like flat eye socket. They are a suitable monster, I think, for this episode.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they really work this episode. They work as, of course, like if they were just mummies, it wouldn't really work. But like in this sci-fi version of Egypt mythology, it works for these like mummy robots that are just lumbering around. I love the face, like you said, like the eye sockets are fantastic. And you could imagine for kids that'd be spooky back in the day. And then like I love how they have like a little red pyramid in the back of their back, which I don't know. Did you catch that?
Yeah, the little, like, antenna or whatever
Yeah.
sticking out from the cloth.
I think that's a little cool addition that they put into the costume. And like they did a good job making the designs iconic. I would say like they're iconic monsters for this story. And of course every Doctor Who episode needs its monsters. At this time, I want to introduce a new segment then.
Okay.
This segment is this app that we're both very familiar of, and we both probably spend a little bit too much time looking at, called Letterboxd. And there is all of Class of Doctor Who is on Letterboxd.
Yes, I log every single one.
So I want to give a shout out to some of my favorite letterbox reviews that I see sometimes. In this week's episode, I want to point out Anna Mahengri's review. They said, "Man died as he lived, getting crushed to death by two pig-tittied robot mummies." which is a fantastic review.
Here's one that brings up a good point that I thought of. Paper Plane says there was only one pyramid of Mars. Why is it called Pyramids of Mars?
Better ring to it.
Why isn't it the Pyramid of Mars or the Return of Sutekh or something?
Better ring to it, Ben. Like a lot of Doctor Who episodes, like it's a good name. Okay, so let's move on to the Scotman Bros. Do you want to start with Marcus or do you want to go to Lawrence? Marcus or Lawrence, Ben?
Which is the one
Marcus the bad guy, Lawrence is the radio man.
I don't know. Do you have a lot to say about Lawrence?
I do.
Well, let's talk about him first. I feel like I don't have as much to say about Lawrence.
Lawrence is kind of like at a point just becomes like the third companion in this story. Even gets to go into the TARDIS to go into the future.
That is true.
I think has a good dynamic with Sarah Jane in the Fourth Doctor. Of course, he has that moment where he creates like the is it it's the radio, right? He creates the radio, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
it's his invention that allows messages from deep space to be received.
Which is always fun when like the doctor points out like somebody else's genius. And that scene is fun. I like Lawrence in this story. I think he is a good addition to the gang. Do you disagree with me, Ben? You said you didn't have a lot to say about Lawrence.
I mean, yeah, he's fine. He has that kind of moral dilemma of is it still his brother? And he wants to help him, save him, and he can't, which is what ends up killing him in the end.
Which is a great scene. It's one my favorite scenes of the story is when he's like when the Scotman Brewer's confrontation and he's trying to reason with them and trying to break him from his spell and then he dies, of course.
And the worst thing is there is a little bit of Marcus still left in them,
Yeah. It's a great scene.
but he couldn't reach him. Yeah, I mean Lawrence was good. I just don't know if I will remember him a year from now over the antagonists of Marcus.
So, what did you think of Marcus Scarman, Ben? Cool little fact before we get into your thoughts. Marcus Scarman, they made an action figure of him, which I just think is so fucking funny that they just made an action figure of just a dude.
Yeah.
But definitely, like, with the action figure range, the guy who does it, you could tell that this is like you could tell what his favorite stories are because like he'll make like bunch of action figures for that particular story. And Pyramids of Mars is one of those examples where like they made a playset of like the ship with Marcus Scarman had the like transporter that Sutek uses. Like they went all out for Pyramids of Mars.
That's cool.
Which is always funny just because it's like, what? Like, they made this, like, toy for this thing that, like, for their 70s TV cult show.
Hey, it is one of the legendary episodes, so
Oh, of course. But yeah, let's go back to Marcus Scarman. What did you think of Marcus Scarman, Ben?
he is quite an interesting antagonist, especially, that scene with his brother is really great, where there's still that little glint of his original persona left in him. He has like a great imposing presence. Like I just think the actors did a really great job with that. He's got like kind of like Dracula makeup going on, which adds to it as well. In the absence of Sutek himself, I think he is a good antagonist for the majority of the serial.
I definitely agree with you. I think the actor does a great job. He has definitely the face for it.
Yeah,
He kinda looks you mentioned Dracula before. It's like he kinda does look like Christopher Lee mixed with, Peter Cushing. Like, he has that old British man face to him.
a little bit. Yeah.
And like you said, like, the makeup really adds to that he is kinda like this possessed walking corpse in a way. But you could also buy him in the original where like, the original opening scene of just, he's, like, this British explorer trying to, find the secrets of Egypt past in the pyramids,
Mhm.
an archaeologist. And then when he becomes the possessed Sutek version, he does a really great job of playing that evil baddie.
Mhm.
But yeah, a G, Ben, a G. Definitely, I think the story works because of like Marcus Scarman, and like even like Marcus Scarman works because of Abraham, because like it kind of like it constantly is like evolving to like it's you start off with like the oh god this guy like this is the bad guy, and it's like no we have an even more worse evil person than him, and then it evolves into of course
Yes.
Sutek, which is the main villain of this story. I guess now is a good time to just jump right to Sutek. What did you think of Sutek, Ben?
Really, really interesting. I mean, he definitely feels like basically the biggest, baddest, most evil and powerful enemy that the Doctor has ever faced. A literal god that somehow he has to overcome. Well, Osiren.
He's just a powerful alien.
Yeah, the, like, mask and the jackal head are interesting design. Mask is definitely better than the jackal head.
I agree.
Very interesting and iconic.
Before you get into more, I want to go back to what you said before. We can like do this in layers, right?
Yeah,
But like I totally agree that like they really set him up the stakes of Sutek of the, like he is like the biggest threat the Doctor has ever faced, which of course is shown via like at first Tom throughout the story really sells it of like he's very serious throughout most majority of it, being like, no, you don't understand like the implications. Like he is the most evil god. Like he has all the power in the world. He's gonna destroy everything. He makes that very clear throughout the majority of the story.
very serious and scared, and, like, he gets really pissed at people like Lawrence when he's messing things up. This is end of the universe scenario that needs to be stopped at all costs.
So there is a behind the scenes fact for this film.
Mhm.
If you at all got the impression that Tom Baker was pissed throughout this serial, it's because he was. He didn't like Patty Russell as a director, so he really clashed with her. So he's kind of in a pissy mood throughout the majority of the story because he didn't like the director. But the power of Tom Baker is that his doctor just for this story, it works. You buy it 100% just fits in with like no, of course he's pissed. He needs to like it adds to the threat of Sutek that the doctor is pissed at everyone and is like in a grumpy mood because of the stakes of this story.
Yes.
I find that as to be a very funny fact about the behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
it makes total sense when you find that information out and watch the story.
I guess Tom just embodies the character so much.
Yeah.
Can't tell what's acting and what's real. It all just is the Doctor.
And a part of what makes him pissed off during this performance is that, like, remember, and I think part three, he dresses up as a mummy.
Mhm.
You probably thought, "Oh, that's not Tom Baker under that mummy suit. That's just another one of the mummy actors." No, the director said, "Sorry, Tom. They would know it's you because you are very particular. So it's Tom Baker in the mummy suit."
Oh.
So, like,
I thought for sure it was just, like, they got one of the guys, and then Tom's just off screen with a mic.
no.
No.
Which is why, again, he's was pissed at the director because he didn't agree with their directing style. But also, I understand where the director was coming from because Tom has a particular way of how he just is as a person. So, like him in the mummy suit, you would add a little bit to it, even though at the end of the day, you can't really tell it's Tom under there. There's very limited motion.
No.
But anyways, I thought that needed to be said in the podcast. So we go back to Sutek.
Yes.
Like Tom's pissy performance really adds to this like threat. And then the cliffhanger part three, and then at the beginning of part four, we of course get that scene of the Doctor and Sutek facing off. And Tom gives his best pain acting in the whole show. He's in like severe pain when Sutek is giving his like green eyes to him. And like that conversation just really like showcases like how small the Doctor is in comparison to Sutek, this godlike being.
Yeah. He is a Time Lord, but Sutek is a god.
And he is just an ant. Like it is fantastic. And this story, without that moment of the Doctor and Sutek facing off, it wouldn't work as well. Sutek as a villain is just bolstered by that scene, and just like you really buy that this is a threat.
Yes.
And then, of course, the thing that also signifies that like Sutek is a threat to be menaced with is the show does something that for a show with time travel, this serial showcases something that I don't know if this has been done before. You would know more than me when the Doctor takes Sarah, and for some reason also takes Lawrence, to 1980 to show the consequences of what's going on in 1911 and what ripples it could have on 1980.
Yeah. I mean, there's always the question of like the doctor could just go in the TARDIS and leave, but this, I think, yeah, for the first time shows what would happen if he does that.
Which is a highlight of the serial and one of my favorite Doctor Who moments. It adds to those stakes of Hutek that they need to stop him. Like, it's not just like okay. It's not like the Daleks and Death the Daleks where like they can just be stopped by like just by the most stupid ways. It's like, no, this is a threat that we have to deal with this or the whole world is gonna die.
Yeah.
And then I have in my brain just Elizabeth Sladen just going like, but I'm from 1980, and then there's just having to deal with the thought process of, well, if we don't do this, then I will not exist, and the universe will die. Coming to terms with those stakes, it's great. I love it.
It's a digression, but she's from 1980, the unit dating.
Yeah, that's screws everything up. Robert Holmes, how dare you? You didn't talk to Terrence Dicks before that, and you screwed everything up. Of course, if you want to have more discussion behind unit dating, we have a bonus episode about us talking about unit dating.
Just a brief little thing, yeah.
But he could have just said, like, I'm from 19. At this point, it would be like, but I'm kind of why is it a thing again? Because it's like the stories and unit takes place in 1980, so then this wouldn't be just 1980; it would be in the 1980 somethings, which is the reason for all this.
Yeah, it's because like, I think it has to do with the order of, like, the time between Web of Fear, Invasion, and Spearhead from Space. There's a
Yeah.
certain amount of time between those 3 things that doesn't account for, like, Robot to be 1980.
Yeah, which is why it would be like the Patriot era would have took place in the 80s, which it would have probably wouldn't have just been 1 year. So then it would have been like she would have been from 1980 something. All Robert Holmes had to do was give it 80 something date, but I had to screw it all up. Okay. You mentioned his costume. I agree that like in the mask, he looks so much better. The dog, of course, just the limitations of the day, Ben, that they couldn't have done like a cool jackal dog head for Sutek and probably the time restraints they had. But the mask that Sutek wears itself is cool, like the Egyptian mask.
Yeah. What does he, if it's not too much of a spoiler, Sutek in season 1, is that Jackal or Mask?
It is Jackal,
Gotcha.
sadly. I don't like Sutek as Jackal. It makes so much better when he is a masked get up. And like just Sutek just sitting in a chair for some reason works better. And then did you catch the hand in the chair, Ben?
No.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you're gonna have to do some looking up. But like Sutek has a butt hand.
A butt hand?
Yeah.
I'm looking at a video.
Do you see it? Do you see the butt hand?
I guess. It's not really, I thought it was, like, attached to him, but it's just adjusting the pillow that he's sitting on. There's just someone crouched behind the chair.
And they cut that out from the omnibus version, which is such a shame. The Tales of the TARDIS version. And everyone always jokes about where did that hand come from? Where did Sutek's hand come from?
Do they address that in, season 1?
They do not, sadly. But had to be sad. But yeah, so the Egyptian mythology element of this story, Ben. What did you think of that? And do you think using the combination of the Egyptian mythology with sci-fi worked?
Yeah. It's a very cool idea. I think I've said it before. I like when just really in fiction, but in Doctor Who especially when like historical events are explained by like, oh, actually it was these aliens, or actually the doctor did that. Injecting the sci-fi into our real history is such a cool concept, and I like it in this serial.
It's cool. I remember as a kid, it reminded me of like Marvel's Thor shit. of just like having the North mythology and adding it to like for me, it would have been the MCU Thor, taking the mythology and adding the sci-fi to it. Kind of similar. I don't know. Did you ever watch Stargate?
Yeah, or I watched the movie, maybe a couple episodes of the TV show.
But I believe Stargate's kind of like this, where it's kind of Egyptian mythology mixed with science fiction.
Yeah.
I don't know when it would have been an earlier example before Pyramids of Mars. I would imagine that it probably existed somewhere. It seems it's a little bit too much of a good idea for it to be originated in Doctor Who.
Of what?
Of mythology gods being science fiction.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Like I don't know where. I'm having a blank on what that could have been inspired from.
It's probably some 1890s novel.
Which, of course, they reference H.G. Wells in this story. Like Lawrence says something along the lines of, "Oh, this is like one of H.G. Wells' novels."
Yes.
Which is fun. But no, it's a cool idea. It works for the story very well, that, like, adding that bit.
The doctor shoulda chimed in that he knows H.G. Wells. I think he does.
I do not know what you're talking about.
I know you don't.
Is this first or second Doctor? Or is this books?
The comics,
Ah, I would have no idea.
and not the good comics. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to find it.
But anyways, no, the sirens and stuff is cool, and it's dope, and I don't know what more to say about it. So we have to address the elephant in the room. Pyramids of Mars, we've been glowing about it. Haven't had too many criticisms, but like all great Doctor Who stories, it has its giant clams, and you know what I'm going to talk about, Ben.
No.
It's the puzzles in Part 4 that like really bring down the story, and it's
Oh,
just
yeah, that was a little weird. Doing a little death to the Daleks thing.
which they mention. Shira says something along the lines of, like, she mentions, like, "Oh, this is kind of like that city," which I don't understand why she's saying it because she wasn't a part of the puzzles and then inside the city because she was off away doing her own thing. But I think Philip Hinchcliffe did like, or it was either Robert Holmes and Philip Hinchcliffe liked the idea in Death to the Dog, so they put it in there for some reason. They liked the puzzle idea. I will say the puzzles work better in Pyramids of Mars than they do in Death to the Daleks. Would you agree, Ben, or would you disagree?
Yeah, I guess. They're more interesting, at least. You can kind of follow them a little bit more.
He has to like measure his scarf and gotta do his thinking, but like it is a weak point. It's definitely just like once that section of Pot 4 when they're on Mars does the pacing does kind of slow down. It loses that like the great sets of like the mansion set, and it loses like the great outdoor filming. So it kind of just it's boring in my opinion, at least. I don't know how you felt about Pot 4, the Mars stuff. But I think that's definitely the low point of the story.
Yeah, the beginning and end of part 4, that is good, but that middle where they're just kind of going through the different test chambers is much less interesting. It doesn't ruin it though.
No, no, it does not. But like, all right. In terms of what else to talk about in Pyramids of Mars, an image that strikes out to me is Sarah like holding the gun to blow up the ship and blowing up the ship. That's a pretty cool moment for Sarah in this episode that I gotta give a shout out. And of course, like I said in Letterbox review, the big mummy titty death is a fantastic death. And I really do love that fact about the story that all the side characters die. It's very much in line with this type of Doctor Who that like we're gonna set up all these characters and just gonna pick them off one by one. It's very fun to watch. Do you have any final thoughts?
I found it. The doctor never met H.G. Wells at this point. He met H.G. Wells' friend, Theo, Theophilus Tolliver, in the comic story The Eternal Present. And he goes and he tells H.G. Wells about the doctor.
Thank you for the insight, Ben.
You're very welcome.
I
I thought he met H.G. Wells, but he just met friend.
That's like probably some of the most niche Doctor Who lore. I bet you could go to you know about Gallifrey 1?
No.
Gallifrey 1 is like the big Doctor Who expo in LA. I bet you could go to Gallifrey 1 and ask that question, and nobody in the audience would know the answer. It's so niche.
If I do a Theophilus Tolliver cosplay, you don't think people will get it?
No, Ben.
What?
They'll just be all there with their Matt Smith cosplays, having fun saying Geronimo, and being out saying all Alonzi and having fun, and then just be there being like, "Who the fuck is this guy?"
I gotta get back to the comics. I gotta read some Fourth Doctor comics.
Like a lot of good Fourth Doctor comics. It's like the comics seem to like get really good when like later a little bit later on in the Fourth Doctor run.
Once,
Like
Doctor Who magazine starts publishing them,
yeah, that's when it seems like it gets
I'm
good.
still in the TV action stuff.
And then like the guy who like wrote for Judge Dredd writes for it. And then even Alan Moore writes for it at a point. Um so there's some that's when the comics seem to get good. But anyways, Ben, any final thoughts on Pyramids of Mars?
Just that it's really very good.
Okay. The cliffhangers, Ben. Take us away.
First one is hooded figure who is later revealed to be Garmin kills Ibrahim for daring to think that he could serve Sutek.
I bring Sutek's gift of death. Though something that is in my mind when I watch that is Russell T Davies, who of course is the guy who brought back Doctor Who and is now doing Doctor Who again. His first like big show that he did was called Queer as Folk.
I've heard of it.
And one of the characters in this show, there's a scene where he just watches in the middle of the night Pyramids of Mars, and it's that moment of I bring Sutek's gift of death, and he mimics it while like rewinding it to that moment. It's just like it's very much showing that like of course this guy's gonna he's showing his love for Doctor, and of course he's gonna bring back Doctor Who, and also one day bring back Sutek
Yeah,
as a showcase of how much he loves Pyramids of Mars. Because I would imagine he took that because he probably did that himself one night. I shouldn't even say one night. He probably did that multiple nights, rewatching Pyramids of
every night.
every night. His Pyramids of Mars. But it's a great pot one cliffhanger, mind you. It's one of the top pot one cliffhangers.
Yes. Second one of the mummies tries to strangle Sarah.
Which is very intense for a kid. That's what I thought about it. Like she's rarely like pleading for the doctor to help her in that moment. Elizabeth is giving her all in that scene. It's kind of on that line of like I could imagine why someone like a Mary Whitehouse would write into the BBC saying this is inappropriate for children. Like you could make the argument that a child would be like stuck with those final moments for a whole week,
Of her being strangled, potentially to death.
pleading for help.
Yeah. And the third one is the doctor disrupts Sutek's concentration, the rocket blows up, and then the doctor is attacked with a blast of Sutek's mental energy.
It's a great pot for a cliffhanger. It's really great for pacing too. Like everything's coming together and it's just like a big bam. Come back next week.
Yes. So what's the best cliffhanger then?
I think it's pot one, but I could understand why somebody would say it's pot three.
Yeah, part one is very good. Really sets the stage that, oh, yeah, this big evil bad guy that's been terrorizing the doctor, he's nothing. There's an even bigger, eviler bad guy who works for an even bigger and eviler bad guy.
There's always a bigger fish, Ben.
Exactly. So, how, Cam, are we going to rate this episode?
See, the problem is we have already, in terms of what we have ranked so far for the Fourth Doctor,
I'm assuming it's not a perfect 10.
it's not a perfect 10. It's not as good as Genesis, in my opinion. The question is
Is it better than Ark in Space?
Ark in Space is the big one. Is that like I could imagine like a fan wouldn't be mad over like if you preferred Ark in Space or Pyramids of Mars. You feel me?
Yeah.
If somebody said, "Oh no, that's one of my favorite stories," you wouldn't be like, "Oh, that's kind of that's odd." I wouldn't imagine that would be my favorite story. It's like, nope, I totally could imagine this. Somebody would say either story was their favorite Fourth Doctor story. But the question is, do I prefer Pyramids of Mars to Ark in Space? And the answer is yeah. So I'm gonna rate it 9.5.
I agree. I'm gonna rate it less, but still more than what I rated Ark in Space. I'm giving it a 9.2. Very, very good. The polls. I imagine this one is up there, like top 10 or top 5.
So Pyramids of Mars ranks number 3 as of 2023. It also ranked number 3 in 2009 and 1998. Only time that it wasn't was in 2014 when it ranked number 4. In terms of the overall ranking in 2014, Pyramids of Mars ranked in the number 8 slot. So even though it was the fourth play, even though it was the fourth best story in terms of Fourth Doctor, it's still ranked in the eighth spot overall, which is kind of insane. Do you agree, Ben? Could you imagine that this is one of the top ones?
Top top 10 best Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who, or not classic, top 10 Doctor Who story as of 2014 is that's very high, but maybe, yeah.
It makes sense because everyone that watched the story would rate it pretty highly. And it makes sense that it would be in that top echelon of stories that there enough people would give it a 9 or even a 10 to make it be in that top slot or at least close to it.
Yes.
So join us, ladies and gentlemen, next week when we talk about the android invasion. Terry Nation returns, but not writing a Dalek story in the first time. And for you, it would be since I is it always since Keys of Marinus? I think so.
Yes. Those are the only 2 that are not Dalek stories that he wrote.
Let's join us next week in that and see how that holds up and how Terry Nation deals with not having his favorite little pepper pots. And then, like, we're on the podcast services. Check us out, and we have the shorts on YouTube and TikTok. Look us up. Who we would link down below if you're on YouTube.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Peace out, everyone.